Any
We can
medical corporations?
medical would be huge, bro. So and not just the size of the company, but the industry as well. Like
Hmm.
tech, it's becoming a thing now where tech, like corporations, stereotypically are more lackadaisical. You probably have heard
Yeah, dude.
about
Did you
that.
see that thing with Elon? How he does ketamine,
Yeah, I know. Well, we talked about that.
microdoses ketamine.
We
Yeah,
talked about that.
that's awesome.
But on this, are you ready? I have 6 questions, and we can kind of bounce back and forth. I'm sure you'll want to know my answers to some of these questions.
All right,
Okay.
let's do it.
Um, so, do you remember the first podcast you ever watched? Who was it? On what platform was there a guest, etc., etc.?
It was actually Alex Jones on the Joe Rogan podcast.
What did you think about it?
I remember being very excited just because he's such a charismatic person and the things
What
that he says.
What did you know about him when you saw the podcast? What was your concept of him?
I knew nothing about him. It was actually Matty P. He was like, "Oh, dude, you
You
should check this out."
Wait, did you know nothing about Joe Rogan and Alex Jones, or just
I
nothing
Yeah, I
about
knew
Joe
nothing
Rogan?
about Rogan and Alex Jones,
Oh,
so that was my
really?
first podcast. Yeah.
What? So when Matty P recommended it to you, what made you want to watch it though? What did he sell it as?
At the time, we were still getting to know each other, and he knew that I was open minded, and so he told
He's
me to
like,
check it
check out these two crazy people, bro.
out. Yeah, man, we were talking a lot about aliens and such, so he
He's
just
like,
told
you
me to
should
check
check
it
out
out.
Alex Jones. At that moment, were you like, I want to check out more of this guy's podcast, it's Joe Rogan?
Yeah, as soon as I watched the first one, I was hooked on him.
Did you watch it all the way through? Or did you stop and like, wait a minute, they're talking
I
about some
watched the whole
crazy
thing.
stuff?
I watched the whole thing, but I remember I had to pause it. I had to
Um,
pause that first episode with Alex Jones just because my
yeah,
mind was getting
they're saying
blown.
some crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Dude, for me at this point, it just passes right through the filter. Like it's just so insane. It's so insane that I can't even dedicate energy to that kind of stuff because it is like so. It would take so much energy.
What do you
You
mean
know what
by
I'm
the
saying?
filter? Tell me about that.
It's like, will I entertain a 1 hour conversation about this and like if there's a fight breaking out, will I be so invested that I wouldn't notice the fight?
Yeah.
Like if it completely tunnel visions me, like, you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I was just gonna expand. I think I like that about our friendship because I am the type that's gonna entertain these conversations
Yeah, I know, and
in
it's
my
not
head and
like
these
it's not an
ideas.
issue for me. I'll take some L-tyrosine recover. But like
Yeah.
the feeling is very similar to if you're a more introverted person, you have to go out and interact with a bunch of people. That feeling after of exhaustion is how I feel after like a conversation I would have with I would even watch Alex Jones have on the Joe Rogan podcast.
Yeah. Yeah. I know what you mean, man. And simultaneously, I feel the same way. Some things he says are really out there. I'm not sure if I believe everything he says, but it's just fun to use
Is it
some brain power and contemplate these things.
my brain when he says stuff, it takes a lot of branches because he's proposing. There's so many propositions of how reality is, like
Yeah.
underlying substructures of government and power, and like I
Yeah.
can't.
You know what's cool actually is that
It's
he
not
can
like I have
actually
a strong
back up.
influence on it. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
so. Yeah, that's the crazy. That's what makes it even worse that he backs us up and then stuff happens that he calls out.
Yeah, he can back up everything he says, and that's why I'm excited about Bobby Kennedy Jr. Because again, he was on the Rogan pod, and I've seen him on
Robert.
other pods.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bobby K
Have you watched the full one that he is?
on Rogan, or
Yeah. I
I
told
saw.
I told
Yeah, I
one of
saw
my
the
friends
full
I
one,
could
and I've
only
seen it.
watch part of it. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good, man. Yeah, I saw the full one, and then I've seen clips of him here and there, and I'm actually really interested in reading his book. Because he's not necessarily anti-vaxxer. He's just asking us to question the efficacy of these vaccines and what was promised to us.
Dude, you'll have to have Danny give you his uh his soliloquy, his what is the thing called? It starts with a M. he has like a good narrative about it. He knows a lot about what happened. But
Mhm.
anyways, I want to move on to this
Yeah. What
other
about you? What
question.
was your first pod?
Oh, I was going to ask you another question, but my first podcast was Jordan Peterson on Joe Rogan, and my friend told me to listen to it. I think when I was a sophomore or junior in high school, and I listened to parts of it, and I was like, "Oh, this guy's got some kind of cool concepts." This Jordan Peterson guy, and I knew Joe Rogan because he commentated the UFC. Um, and I had kind of heard of his podcast, but at the time when I listened to it, I got, I would say, 8 to 10% of what Jordan Peterson was about. It was when he was first getting in trouble. Where was he at? In Toronto. Um, I
Yeah,
think
that
that
bill
was
they were
even.
trying to pass.
Yeah, no, it was like a few months after that happened.
Hmm.
That my friend was like, "Hey, you should listen to this." And then I stopped listening to. I didn't listen to anything else, and then I started listening to him again in college, freshman year. Joe
Hmm.
Rogan in general.
And what was your initial emotional reaction? Like how I was saying, how I at first was very excitable what I was hearing.
Sorry,
What
what
were
do you
you?
mean?
So when you were listening to that first podcast with Peterson, how did
Yeah,
that make you feel emotionally? Because like how I was telling you that I got very excited listening to Alex Jones, and then I was hooked immediately on pods.
I think at the time I had a my focus was on so many different things. I was like, oh, okay, this is cool. This is a cool platform. They're having a conversation. They're talking about interesting things, but it wasn't anything that hooked me. What I remember though did get me was when Joe Rogan was constantly talking about 24/7, constantly talking about psychedelics.
Mm-hmm.
So, and yeah, dude, the timing for when his podcast started blowing up when we were freshmen, sophomore in college, and um, just the people I was hanging out with, it was interesting timing.
Yeah, that thing you just said about the timing. That's really interesting because likewise, I also met Matty P at a very specific time, and then I also got hooked on podcasts at a very specific time in college, and now here we are doing our own podcast.
It's
So it just
because,
seems
and
like one big
also,
synchronicity.
I know. Did you think that you wanted to? When did you think like, oh, it'd be cool to have conversations recorded?
I would say I definitely grew into this because younger me was definitely more introverted. But as I've been growing up, getting older, I'm realizing that one of the most interesting things you can do is just conversate with other people.
Or, yo, so when I put this up, I'm gonna be like questions with Oscar, but I want us to have a first official one in a bit. After um, practicing certain dialectic techniques. I want to get there's some. I'm skipping some questions, but I want to hit some that I think are good. I have 8 here. Okay.
Okay.
Um, do you think that podcasting is an art, and why or why not? And you're
I
basically
think,
gonna need to give your definition of what an art is as well for this.
okay. So I would start by saying that I think conversation is definitely a skill. And because we are broadcasting this through media, then technically it is art. As for what art is, though, that's a bit tricky. Uh, the definition I can give you right now is that when an individual decides to capture something on a specific canvas to show the rest of us what they're seeing, I would say that qualifies as art.
So in general, you would say it's art, and then because of how it's presented, it reaches a bunch of people. Um, it is art for that reason.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like
So by that
art is
definition,
something that can be created by someone, set somewhere, and other people can come and experience it.
that's a big one. It's about showing the experience to other people and having common experience.
Word.
Unus mundus.
So tying to the name of the podcast, I thought I actually had this thought about a week ago, and I was listening to Chris Williamson's podcast, and like the way he
Mhm.
was interviewing his technique, and Lex Fridman's technique too. Um, I was like, hey, is podcasting possibly an art? Because they were doing it like professional interviewers, and I was like, nah. At first, I was like, nah, there's no way it's an art. Blah blah. Blah. And then I was like, well, what does an art really mean? And what I would describe it as you have disorganized chaos and possible combinations and permutations that you can select from a set of whatever it could be behaviors, tactics, skills, and you pull them
Hmm.
out in such a way that it's organized and reaches intent. For example, because there's infinite number of ways to throw a podcast. You could have multiple guests. You could have an interview. You could be interviewing someone. Um, you could just be having a conversation like you and I are having one on one. You could do reactions, right? Um, it could be more like a formal kind of like interrogation, like they did to Andrew Tate. um, there's so many
Yeah.
different ways to do a podcast, and if you think about what's the general thing you're trying to do, um, you could entertain, educate. You know,
Hmm.
uh, I would bracket most podcasts. I can't really think of any that are outside those two, entertain and educate. And the best, in my opinion, can do both. And the best can do
Hmm.
both. So there's an infinite number of ways, like I was saying, to run a podcast. And when you create one, you're pulling out of that chaos and you're like, okay, this is my way of achieving that goal. And you do it over time. You do it hundreds and hundreds of times, like Lex Friedman has, or Joe Rogan, or Chris Williamson. You start to develop your own technique, your own style, and
Hmm.
you're like, depending on the guest, I'll have this kind of demeanor, this kind of persona on, ask these
Hmm.
kinds of questions, communicate in this way, and you like develop your own style, your own flavor of podcasting. That's why I think it's an art, because you're pulling from an essentially infinite set of possible ways to do it, and then over time it becomes your own way of doing it.
Right. Yeah, because when people watch podcasts, they want to be part of the experience, and so that's what you're portraying in this podcast,
Yeah,
or in
there's
any
really good
podcast.
ones that do, like you were. I think it was you. We were talking about how, like, if you ever get lonely, just throw in a podcast and it seems
Hmm.
like you're there. Yeah, for me personally,
Being a fly
cannot.
on the wall.
It doesn't work like that for me. They're just robots in my coming through my headphones. But
Just another
yeah,
one of the voices.
just another one of the 13.
Bro, you're such a Gemini.
I am.
Shout out Geminis, by the way.
I'm an Asclepius. I'm an Asclepius.
Yeah.
So, but right, can you see how that ties to the name?
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
I'm glad we chose his name.
For that reason,
This
and
madre.
because I I was like, people were asking, so what's the pod? Like Jared was asking, what's the podcast going to be about? Like whatever we want it to be. But then I was thinking though, if I could categorize in what we are going to talk about, it would be like education, stories, learning, experiences, and
Hmm.
in a way, all of these things, especially like education, is pulling from an infinite set of possibilities
Hmm.
to like a known set of them,
Hmm.
to like a more ordered way, pulling out of chaos, and that's I first heard about that principle from Jordan Peterson, ironically enough, um,
Synchronicity.
and that's synchronous. So it's interesting because I think it is more like underlying themes because you have the same things that pop up in science. I
Hmm.
actually got to share with you this quote. I might have sent it to you. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I did. It's from the physicist Werner Heisenberg. The first gulp from the glass of natural sciences will turn you into an atheist, but at the bottom of the glass is God waiting for you. Which
I
is
like that. It's very profound. Because
uh
I would say I took a route like that as well. Just took a quick tangent. When I first started learning about the natural sciences in high school, I definitely took a bit of atheistic route, and then going to Lemoyne, and then specifically with the Jesuit education we received, I feel like I've come full circle.
This is a good segue question then, bro. Off this, so you'll be able to. I want you to talk more about that in this. Currently, relating to that, what are your top three niche subjects slash topics to learn about? Let's say in the past 6 months, what are the ones that you've been learning the most about?
Mm.
Are they the same as when you went through high school education, college, etc., etc.?
Just glazing back real quick in time, I would say that I probably most likely have the same interests, but I've definitely branched out a bit. I mean, I'm always going to be curious to learn more science. More recently, I've gotten into more of the spiritual route. And then in college, I actually picked up philosophy. So I would
Yeah,
say
dude.
those three: science,
The thing
spirituality,
is,
philosophy.
though, no matter how much you learn, bro, I know you, and you're always gonna be a fucking idiot.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong.
So you, dude, yeah, the newest one is for you though is certainly spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the allegedlys.
It might be. Might be the
So
allegedly.
yeah, because don't you think in high school it's more broad?
What's more broad?
Well, I don't know.
Like the subject matter?
Philosophy's a pretty broad term. Your mic just cut
Well,
out. I can't hear a single thing you're saying.
oh man,
It's
we
back. Yeah.
Okay. I actually didn't encounter any philosophy in high school.
I didn't either, but philosophy and is such a broad.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Because now, how I think about philosophy now, even while I was in my undergrad course, is completely different. Not
Mm-hmm.
like most, it was pretty different from how I conceptualize philosophy now.
Yeah, and to tie it back to what you were saying earlier, of course, I like to learn about all these things, but I wouldn't say I give them too much weight in my real life. I just see what I can extrapolate and
That's the
apply to my own
dude.
life.
See, that's like the big thing, dude. For me, is my mind for a while, but just recently has amped up more. Is if I'm learning something, how can I leverage that to make myself as a person more effective to become more successful?
Mm. And
Because
not to tie.
you know my opinion on just talking to send information back each other. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, especially with the allegedly.
Go
But
ahead. You were saying something though.
bro, so what would you say are your top three interests in podcasts or whatever media you're
Yeah,
consuming?
I'm gonna go really specific. Um.
Martial arts for sure is going to be a big one.
Oh, learning wise. Um. Kickboxing with kickboxing rules, like knees, shins, hands, no elbows. Evolutionary psychology, and dude, probably personal finance would be the third
Mm-hmm.
one. You know, but let's compare that to like when we were living together. It was like depth psychology, uh, instrumental chemistry, and like nutrition science.
Yeah,
I
and
that's we always be changing, bro.
I know,
you
and I was going to say
but
that
you were
that's
still
my
always heavy in the philosophy since that time, though. You know.
yeah, man. I mean, yeah, it's going to be a constant stay. But I would say that's probably one of my favorite things about you. I would argue that you're a philomath,
Polymath. That's Benjamin
polymath.
Franklin. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I don't even remember. I heard. I like saw that in someone's description. I was like, "Oh, what does that mean?" And it was Ben Franklin, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Gangster,
G
gangster,
for
dude.
sure.
I know we should recreate his experiment with the key and the kite, dude. But let's take it up. Let's take it up a notch and go to the highest rooftop access in New York City. Let's do it off the top of the Brooklyn Mirage. Let's go to the top of it. We'll join hands to see who has more resistance. Put a T cable between us, and then fly the kite. And let's amp it up even more. Let's have it be copper wire that we're touching. So like low resistance, and it'll be a challenge between you and me to see who conducts electricity better. As true polymaths, that's what Benjamin Franklin, I think, would have wanted.
That's what he would want, allegedly.
Okay, so I have 3 other questions. I'm going to choose. Okay, I'll ask you the one that I was kind of talking about earlier, and then we can wrap this up quickly. This first most serious trial
podcast number
official,
1.
the beta version.
Beta.
And then so we'll be in the beta version, and then we'll make the group decision when it goes to alpha launch.
Okay.
I think though this is honestly I like how this is going. So, opinions on YouTube versus Rumble versus Spotify versus Twitter censorship. The concept of censorship in general. Should all voices, even if they incite violence or are factually incorrect or found out to be incorrect, be able to be viewed by the public, by general population?
Well, that's very loaded, but
it is loaded on purpose, bro. I want you to talk about it.
I'll definitely start off by saying that, at least the way things stand now, Twitter seems to be one of the last bastions of free speech.
Twitter.
Because I think Elon has demonstrated how much censorship is going on, especially with the FBI and some of the presidential things that were going on.
So Twitter, and that's after Elon bought it. Elon spent a cool rack and a half to buy Jack Dorsey's project. So then the other part of my question though, so as far as no censorship goes, thumbs up for Twitter. Thanks to Elon Musk. Do you think all voices, even if they are inciting violence or are found out to be horribly incorrect and can be so incorrect that they can harm people, be allowed to be broadcasted?
Man, you're trying to gotcha me. That again, that's very loaded.
Dude, I've got some good questions.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to say I stand by liberty and personal liberties, so free speech should exist.
I'm going to be honest with you, bro. I didn't know what you were going to say for this question. I tried to pick questions I didn't know what you were going to say. So you're all the way no censorship.
As long as you're not harming anyone, that's where I draw my line with personal liberties. As long as you're not
give me an example.
Intentionally
give me
harming
an example of
else.
A tweet that would harm someone else.
I can't say it or work it. Decensor, demonetize, whatever.
Oh, dude, it's that's great. That's a great way to get out of it and understand that. So you know the Alexander Hamilton quote?
No, tell me.
So I got to give the context as a history nerd. It was him versus Thomas Jefferson, and Thomas Jefferson wanted a strong state government, a good division of power, strongly based on the population in each state. Alexander Hamilton, who was in what was known at the time as the Federalist Party, wanted a strong central government, and he believed basically that general population's intelligence curved down, like down level, kind of like you're in my 44 IQ level.
Well, we know that to be true. I mean, we know that intelligence is on a bell curve.
Right, but the thing is where is that medium compared to what's the deviation between max, or what's the difference between max and min? But the quote I'm dragging this on is Alexander Hamilton said the masses are asses, and he thought that there should be a strong centralized government to correct the idiocy of the common person.
So here's the thing. The reason why I won't rule it out completely is because in theory that sounds good. I'm sure there's a lot of historical examples of a strong government or a strong leader. I think it becomes an issue what like with the intentions of that leader slash organization and where they're leading the population.
So I want to tie this into censorship because let's say go back to COVID and you see someone tweet something peculiar about the nature of the virus, some kind of immune response it evokes, some sort of like interleukin or adverse cytokine response, blah blah blah. You understand as a person who has a background in immunology and biology, what things sound more likely than others.
Mm.
So going back to the Alexander Hamilton thing is, does the average person know how to fact check things? Like,
I
let's
would say
go.
it's definitely become a lot harder because I mean myself included about how easy it was to be manipulated by the media, the mass media going on, and the mass psychosis it caused. And I would say even I was susceptible to that.
Right, and like I was telling you in the Uber, I want to get access to the journals.
Hmm.
Let's hit up some doctors. But here's the thing, bro, is that even those journal publications
Are corrupt. That's the
can
problem.
be corrupted. That of course, though, if you're going to ask me, that's our best option. Are
Hmm.
those kind of peer reviewed? Um, the methodology is well written out, and it describes everything well. It's been cited by a lot of people too. It's called the H index. Um,
Hmm.
Reputable authors, of course, that have proven that have empirical data. That's pretty good if we can get the whole academic community to agree on some conclusions. But
Yeah.
also you go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, yeah, I agree. Science as a good as a whole. I think we just have to get back to strictly doing science with no political manipulations, and as well being allowed to question the science.
Yeah, the political manipulation. Now I think about that study on MDMA that where there was someone who was funding it who was and like overseeing the facility, the lab conditions you might call them, who had been a previous head of the National Institute for Drug Abuse.
Hmm.
You remember hearing about that?
Yeah.
And they switched the bottle, dude. I've been around the people who do research, especially
Hmm.
with like biochemical research, and there's no way to like if you have solutions that look identical, they're looking identical unless you're sending every single one through IR spec or UV
Hmm.
absorption. You're like, all right, we're gonna give the primate this shot today, you know.
Until the primates are us.
Right? So let's wrap this up. We're
Yeah,
at
but before
almost.
we wrap
Oh
it up,
wait,
I
wait,
actually
wait,
have a
wait.
question
I
for
can't.
you.
I can't hear you.
Before we wrap it up, I actually have a question for you.
Great. Let's go. Let's go.
So, Philium,
Yeah.
what are your intentions with this podcast? What are maybe some small goals, medium goals, big goals?
It would be great. So let's do short-term goals first. Short-term goals first to work on my video and audio editing skills, of course, which you already have been doing. Work on marketing skills, work on networking skills. The initial phases of the podcast. Work on interviewing techniques, kind of like we did today, and um, obviously get used to talking with recording on. Um, Figuring out the kind of energy that we want to have in our exchanges. So those are short term, medium term. Have guests on the podcast, do some research, like I talked about. Some Go out on the street, ask some people some interesting correlations. Uh, you know, medium term. Generate some ideas, maybe come back to some old ideas that we've had from a new perspective. And one of the most important ones is have a place where we can log our conversations, because as I've told you, we've had dozens, maybe hundreds of these types of conversations where we're hitting each other with new stuff, different angles with old stuff, different points in our life, relationships with different people, different jobs, different intentions. And so we'll bounce stuff off each other and it'll hit different. So I want a log of those conversations. And because how many times do you listen to the same podcast? Maybe 3 times, or know that you want to re-listen to one, because the information it has will just come back and smack you across the face at a completely different angle, send you to the hospital.
Yeah, I
Long
like
term,
that.
like
It's a good answer.
long term though, is just like accumulate interactions. Is the best would be the best way to put it.
Right. Right.
All right,
So we're
yeah,
wrapping this up.
we're wrapping this up. It's 9 o'clock. That went for 32 minutes. All right, man. See
It's
you.
pretty good. See ya.